Oh, hello. Today we are doing an updated favorites video. So I think about 2 years ago, I did a top 10 all-time favorite series video. And I think since then, I've both had things come into my favorites or like realizing things are favorites, reading things for the first time that have shot to the top of my favorites list. Overall, just sort of realizing I don't think 10 is quite enough. So I thought I would make an updated version of this video, and this feels like one that is a good candidate for revisiting on a regular basis because as I encounter new series, as I reread series, etc., things kind of come and go from the list. So we're gonna do a top 15 today, and some of these I'm like, yeah, if I'm being honest with myself, that truly is a favorite, so let's just roll with it. Starting with our first one, which I'm mildly abashed to confess, I realized needed to be on the list, and that is the Highland Bride series from Lindsay Sands. Now look, these are goofy, okay? I'm not denying that they're goofy, but I just love them. They're such comfort reads. I describe these as smutty murder mysteries in the locks of ye oldie Highland Scotland. And they are not historically accurate. They're not really going for that. They are very rompy, very fun. The characters are all sort of dumb, but very good-hearted and lovable and hot. I have to say, I love the cover designs of these because I'm like, whoever is painting this man-titty glisten with such loving detail is amazing. I feel like they would be very fun to have a drink with. But anyway, I can't deny, these are some of my favorite comfort reads, and I felt like this had to make the list. Then I'm gonna say, this is a series that in particular makes me think that in a couple of years, I'm gonna wanna revisit the ordering of this list because I foresee that as I continue to read in this series, it's going to rise and rise on the list of all-time favorite series. But for now, I'm going to say at number 14 is The Realm of the Elderlings series from Robin Hobb. The Mad Ship is, as far as I've made it, I'm actually starting Ship of Destiny this weekend. So I've read 5 books in the overall 15 or 16 book arc. I've read the whole of one trilogy and I'm about to finish the second trilogy. She is amazing. I just think because I haven't finished the series yet, I don't feel like I can put it higher than this right now. But this is one of my all-time favorite books, The Mad Ship. I'm very excited to get into Ship of Destiny because I think that will also be great. And her storytelling, her actual prose, her character development, the way she unspools her plots, I mean, it's kind of unmatched, right? I mean, aside from like Tolkien, I feel like she's kind of the best fantasy writer I've ever encountered. So I feel like this is going to rise on the list, and this particular, me getting to the end of this series, I think will occasion having to redo this video. But for now, I'm gonna leave it at 14 since I'm still very much in progress on it, but this is one to watch. This is one on the move. And then I think at 13, I'm gonna say The Natural series from Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This is a YA mystery series that is definitely my favorite YA mystery series I've ever read. It is murder mystery, but with sort of a preternatural, supernatural-ish edge to it, where there are these kids who are recruited by the FBI to finish off their high schooling under the FBI's care because they all have these specific, not quite supernatural abilities, but very heightened physical senses. And the way that this has been pitched is Criminal Minds meets YA, and I think that's right. So I really love her writing. I really like the way she did a love triangle that I actually didn't hate in this book. The character work is really good. The individual books work, but then also the sort of macro plot of the sort of like big bad they're chasing over the course of the series is good. It really goes there, I think, in the finale, and the finale sticks the landing. So this is a 4-book series with a kind of epilogue novella, and all of them are good. This is the second one, and it's my favorite. But yeah, I really, really love this series and continue to think warmly of it as time goes on. Okay, let me try to get this honkin' book without tipping every other book over. Ugh. Okay, I think I did it. I'm gonna say that at, what would this be? Number 12 would be Monstrous by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takada. So Marjorie Liu is the author, Sana Takada is the illustrator. This is definitely my favorite graphic novel series I've ever encountered. The art in this is honestly just like beyond beautiful. I love the art in this. And then the story, it's such a dark, twisty, high fantasy story, intensely female driven. And this is an intensely kind of like matriarchal world in a lot of ways. It's sort of got a steampunky sensibility to it, but it is definitely fantasy. It's got the gods walking among us, which is so my thing. And just overall, I just love the imagination of this. I love the world building, and the story is always going places that I don't expect it to. So even though any individual issue of this series is not necessarily a 5-star, as a whole, this story is a 5-star story for me. Okay, and then I'm gonna say number 11 is the Sherlock Holmes series. So these are probably, if we're talking about the way that Monstrous is my favorite graphic novel series, if we're talking about a favorite short story series, yes, I know that there's a couple of like novellas or short novels in this, but basically a short story series. This is definitely my favorite. This really solidified my love of mystery and of classic mystery. It's a great introduction to classics if people are looking to sort of dip their toes in, because they are so plot driven. They are so iconic in terms of everybody kind of knows the Sherlock Holmes stories already because it's so prevalent in our culture. Yeah, this really holds up. I think if you're looking for fun mystery short stories, it's kind of hard to beat Sherlock Holmes in a lot of ways. And then starting in the top 10, now this might surprise some of you that I'm putting this high up. I think some people might expect this to be closer to number 1, but in terms of the series and not this specific book, I would say that the Murderbot Diaries is at number 10 for me right now. I enjoy every installment that I get in this series. None of them have ever been as good to me as the first one, which is All Systems Red, but I continue to enjoy the story of Murderbot. I continue to enjoy their journey. Is this my favorite sci-fi? I think this is my favorite like straight up sci-fi series I've ever read. And I just love, it's so character driven. There's often sort of a mystery plot element. And yeah, I love Murderbot. I love art. There's so many memorable characters, which is something I really value in long running series. And yeah, I just will keep reading this until there are no more. Love me some Murderbot. Okay, and then number 9, sorry, I already know some people are gonna be like, what the actual hell, Mara, what are you doing? Number 9, if I'm being honest, is the Ice Planet / Ice Home series from Ruby Dixon. I binge read this in November of 2020, and I have kept up with it ever since. I hope that we get as many generations of this as Ruby Dixon will give us. This is my favorite, which is in Ice Home. It's number 7, it's Debbie's Distraction, and this is my favorite in either of the series. I decided to group them together because I really think of them as kind of just one big series, but technically Ice Home is a spinoff, and maybe controversially, I would say that I think I probably prefer Ice Home. I know, but I think maybe I like Ice Home a little bit better than Ice Planet. But anyway, if you're looking for smutty sci-fi romance that has interesting world building, like genuinely some interesting world stuff going on, I love that it's basically an entire planet of himbos, a lot of plucky heroines, and just like, it's very campy and it's very self-aware in its camp, which I love. It's funny, it's meant to be funny, it's sexy, it's meant to be really over the top in its sexiness, and I just think these are so fun. There's a reason these are so bingeable. People, if they get into them, really get into them. It's just fun. Everything from Ruby Dixon I love, but this is definitely my favorite. And then I think we're at number 8, right? I've got my little book here. Yes, number 8. Okay, number 8 is gonna be Percy Jackson, the original series / I guess the Heroes of Olympus, but I haven't finished that, so I feel like I can't say that for sure. But definitely the original Percy Jackson series. Some of this is a case of like, I found this series in the moment I needed it. I needed comfort reading during the beginning parts of the pandemic when I was also very sick with an uncontrolled autoimmune disease at that point. Just like the comfort of a middle grade fantasy read. It's what I needed. Uncle Rick met me in my moment. And this last one, this is one of those series where the ending of the series makes me love the whole series so much more. I love the way this ends. I'm intrigued from what I've read so far in the Heroes of Olympus. I'm in the middle of Mark of Athena right now. And I love this. This is one of my all-time favorites. Again, characters, which is a repetition for me here, but I love the characters. They're so appropriate for middle grade, but also just enjoyable to spend time with even as an adult reader. I really like some of the character arcs, particularly for Percy, Annabeth, and Luke. And yeah, I just feel like that this is a children's classic that adults can also enjoy, at least this adult reader. I didn't read these as a kid. So this adult reader really enjoyed this. And if you're looking for just some like lovely comfort reading, you can't go wrong with Percy Jackson. And then number 7, I'm going to say the overall Hidden Legacy series from Ilona Andrews. So this is the conclusion of the first trilogy. We're getting the conclusion of the second trilogy this year. But I would say if I had to be like objective, I would say that the Hidden Legacy series is the best thing Ilona Andrews has done in terms of the cohesion of the world. It's basically a take on superhero magic. It's sort of like an urban fantasy romance series, but the people understand the fantasy elements to be not rooted in magic. So maybe this is more of like a sci-fi take, I guess, technically. But anyway, basically there are these houses that have these genetic legacies of producing superpowers based on some experimentation gone wrong around our time. Like this is set in the future. So like there are these really powerful houses that have all of these superpowers. These are all basically murder mystery stories in the context of our heroine of the first trilogy is the oldest sibling in a very powerful magic house that is trying to be under the radar. But as they get drawn into the politics of the world, they kind of get exposed. And then there's also a central love story in each of the trilogies. So yeah, this just completely works for me. I always say my perfect story is a speculative world with a strong romantic subplot or plot and a mystery plot engine. And that's what these are. The humor is great. I think Ilona Andrews is very hard to beat in terms of their ability to describe action in a way that's really clear. Like you can see it in your mind and it's really interesting. I really love the way that they build stakes in their stories. I always say Ilona Andrews is my favorite currently writing author, and it's because they have great storytelling for my favorite kind of stories to read. So while I think that this is the best, it's not my personal favorite, but it has to be pretty high up in this overall ranking because it's great. And then at number 6, going to say, I'm kind of changing it up here on the fly, but okay, I'm gonna stick with my original gut here. And number 6 is going to be the Miss Marple series from Agatha Christie. Agatha Christie is my all-time favorite author. This is my second favorite series from her. I named one of my cats Miss Marple. I love how cozy these mysteries are and yet still so brutal. My reread a couple of years ago revealed to me that I think that there's a lot of supplemented female rage in these stories. But again, if you were looking for a way to get into classics, especially classic genre fiction, I mean, it's hard to go wrong with Agatha Christie. There's a reason she is the all-time best-selling author because her books have really held up. They're incredibly entertaining, but also very thoughtful, I think, in certain places in terms of themes and character archetypes that she deploys with a lot of finesse. And her actual prose is just so delicious. It's so effervescent and warm and funny and draws you in. And there's really just never been somebody, I don't think, who's achieved that same sort of lightness of touch in the prose combined with really fun puzzle mysteries. So I would say Miss Marple, if you're looking for a cozier version of Agatha Christie and one that's more set in sort of like rural English village life, you go to Miss Marple for that flavor of Christie. And then I'm gonna say number 5. I'm switching it up a little bit, and I'm surprising myself with this. I'm looking at my top 4 here and I'm a little surprised, but I'm gonna say the Middle-earth series from J.R.R. Tolkien. So we've got The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, The Silmarillion, like the whole schmageggy. I'm gonna put that at number 5. I will say that in terms of true epic fantasy, Tolkien has never been beat in my book. I really love his actual writing, though I could do without the poems. I love the density of his world building, and just, I think he's a classic for a reason. He really set the trajectory for epic fantasy, and aside from Robin Hobb, I just don't think I've ever read someone who delivers as much in terms of both the actual writing, the actual character development, and the plot. Like, he has all of it, in my opinion. I just don't think I've never seen something that I think is better. Now, I will say, depending on how Robin Hobb goes, maybe I will end up changing my mind on that. But for now, Tolkien is still the top for me in terms of epic fantasy. And I'm gonna tell you guys, I think some of this might end up being recency bias when I'm looking at this top grouping here. But I'm just gonna go with my gut here. Okay, so I'm really conflicted between number 3. It's like I know which ones are 3 and 4, and I know which ones are 1 and 2, and I'm really struggling with how to rank these. But the deliciousness is that I'm gonna force myself to do it. Okay, number 4, I'm gonna say the Side Changeling series. Now, some of this is recency bias because I'm in the middle of doing a reread of the series, but should I put it in number 3? No. Okay, we're gonna leave it at number 4. I'm doing a reread of the series, and I am loving and so admiring the amount of craft that is in this series. This is a sci-fi, urban fantasy type romance series. They are definitely romances. They are unquestionably romances. Every book has a different couple in it, but they also, what keeps me coming back to the series is the world building. It's such an interesting world setup, and the political machinations in this are just top tier. That is what keeps me coming back to the series, is like, what's gonna happen with the side council, and what's gonna happen with the consortium, and this person killed this person. Who's gonna fill the power vacuum there? And oh no, the Skynet is collapsing. Is everyone gonna die? I don't know. Like, all of that is what I think what kept me at least binging the series. And then you do have these core romances that keep it being very character driven, which, as I'm being a broken record here, that is what I love. I love character driven series. Like, if I'm committing to a series, I've got to be into the characters. And I just am. In this case, I'm so invested in all these characters. It's so cozy in terms of the community vibes, and yet so brutal at the same time. I just think this is a masterclass in how to do this kind of fiction. And it is, again, in terms of its actual craft, I think it's actually better than one of the series that I'm gonna put above it. But I have a sentimental connection to that series. But craft-wise, very hard to beat. And Eleni's saying, if you want my full thoughts, I'm literally doing an entire podcast about this series. So that is, I'm sure, driving some of the recency bias here. It's very hard to beat Side Changeling, in my opinion. Okay, and then number 3 is another very long-running series that is still in progress. Both 3 and 4 are still in progress, and they're very long-running and don't have like a specific end date that anybody knows of. And that is the In Death series from J.D. Robb. This, I think we just got our 54th or 55th book that just came out. If you are looking for a police procedural that is very character-driven, has a romance element, and is set in the near future, so there is a light speculative element to it, and it just is police procedural mysteries as the plots, this is a series for you. And again, what keeps me coming back to the series is how much I am invested in the characters. The characters have such believable and real character growth over the course of the series. I think another thing that J.D. Robb / Nora Roberts did that is very smart is that even though we're on book like 55, in series time has only progressed, I think, 3 or 4 years. So we get to see these characters growing, and it feels very believable because they're making like subtle shifts over time. Yeah, I don't know. If you get into this series, you get fully into it. It did start in 1995, so I think some of the earlier books haven't aged as well. But once you get to, it's hard to say this to someone, but once you get to like the mid-20s of this series, it just sings. I would say from like the mid-20s to the mid-40s of this series where it's prime time. But the books that are coming out are still really enjoyable, really fun. I hope, because, I mean, I don't want to curse anything. Nora Roberts is getting up there in age at this point. She's in her 70s, and I hope she never dies. But I do hope that she has sort of an end game in mind for this, because I really want us to get a satisfying place to leave this series at some point. But I absolutely love the series. It's such a lovely comfort read, and the fact that there are so many of them makes it all the lovelier. Okay, I'm very conflicted because I just don't know. I want to see what I wrote down as number 1. Interesting. Okay, I'm gonna tell you that number 1 and number 2 are pretty interchangeable to me. Today, when I'm filming, I'm gonna say that Kate Daniels is number 2. And that is because I do think, looking back on the series as I have more time away from it, it ended up being a 10-book series that probably would have been amazing if it had been condensed into an 8-book series. That's what I think in retrospect. But that being said, the pre-plotting of this is pretty astonishing. It basically is broken into 3 mini arcs. So the books 1 through 4, books 5 through 7, and then books 8 through 10 each have their own sort of like supporting macro plot under the mega macro plot of the entire series. This is a series that I think feels very satisfying in terms of when it ends. It makes sense how it ends. It builds up to something and then delivers on that, I think, pretty well. I do think that last book I wish it had been a little longer, because I think it would have been amazing if it had been beefed up a little bit more. And that's why I'm like, if you'd made 2 longer books in the series, I think would have benefited the series as a whole. But aside from that, Kate Daniels just has my heart. Kate Daniels helped me figure out what I really like to read as an adult. And what I like to read is what I've been talking about. I like the romance, I like the speculative element and I like the mystery plots. I also love that every book in this series takes its magic system from a different culture's sort of folk traditions or magic traditions. You know, you'll have a kind of Celtic magic-based book. You will have magic based in sort of like Hindu folk tales. You'll have magic based in kind of like Middle Eastern different folk traditions. It goes around the world, and I think that helps keep the book feeling fresh, or like the different plots feeling fresh, is that we get different sort of magical beasties that we encounter. And I also love the macro plot in particular of this, just like, oh, it's so satisfying. And the concept of this is cool. Basically, it's imagining that every 2,000 years or so, the earth swings from either being driven by machinery and engineering to being driven by magic. And that like around 2010, all of earth started shifting back to magic being real again. And so you'll have different times when electricity is up and electricity works and you can't do magic, but then it'll sort of like blink in to only being magic run. Cars have to be run by both fuel and then by like some kind of magic. So it's an interesting world setup because basically it's like all of these old magical forces are reawakening and everybody is sort of figuring out how to deal with that. So it's set in Atlanta, and it's an Atlanta that is torn between being driven by magic versus being driven by sort of like machines, etc. So anyway, super cool world. I love Kate Daniels. She is one of my very, very favorite all-time characters. I like the romance for the most part, and I love all the side characters. So I do love this series, even though I don't think it's as strong as Hidden Legacy from a technical standpoint. Emotionally, I just love this series and was so defining for me of like what I like to read. But I'm gonna say that today my all-time favorite series is the Poirot series. I feel like this is anticlimactic. If you watch this channel, you probably figured that out. I can't remember if I put this or Kate Daniels as #1 last time, but on any given day it could be either. I like them about the same. Look, my other cat is named after Poirot's sidekick Hastings. I love everything. I just love this series so much. It's puzzle mysteries, again, Agatha Christie's sparkly prose, and the types of stories we get in Poirot just tend to be the types of stories I like. It's much more, they tend to be like country house mysteries or mysteries set abroad, but you get the lovely atmosphere of the early to mid 20th century, depending on kind of when it's happening. Poirot is so insufferable, but also so you kind of just love him. And yeah, I love these so much. You guys know this is not a surprise. So that is my updated favorite series ranking. Definitely let me know what you thought about any of the series that I mentioned or what some of your favorite series are. And I will definitely have to revisit this in a couple of years because I think as I continue to read in some of these series, as I'm reading new series, I could definitely see this list changing, / maybe I'll expand it to 20 the next time I do this. But yeah, anyway, I think that will do it for me. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below, and I think that will do it. I hope you're having an absolutely lovely day today, and I will just talk to you soon.